We're going to continue to reflect on the developing story today, which is the fourth hostage and prisoner release as part of the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. That's all been happening while we've been on air, and let's continue to reflect and analyse more on all of this with Osama Nazzal, who's a Palestinian affairs analyst and joins us from Jenin in the occupied West Bank. I know, Mr. Nazzal, that this release of Palestinian prisoners and detainees will be very close to your heart. Seeing the scenes coming out of Ramallah, where that release took place a few hours ago, what were your feelings?
Yeah, the feeling of every Palestinian family and every Palestinian citizen. It is like a feeling of a jubilance, of happiness, at the same time a feeling of sadness, because while the Palestinian people are celebrating the freedom of their prisoners who have been facing the worst forms of suffering and torture in the Israeli prisons, the Palestinian people remember that the price they paid for such a freedom is very high. It is the blood, it is the flesh of hundreds of thousands of their men, women, and children in Gaza. We know that Gaza has been turned into dust and rubble. And without this step and this bravery by the Palestinian people, I mean their steadfastness and resilience, they would not see these scenes, Palestinian prisoners sentenced to lifelong terms in Israeli prisons, seeing the light now. Many of them talked about their stories and how they spent months and years in solitary confinement in small cells, small rooms, seeing nothing, talking to nobody, the worst form of torture and oppression. And now they got the opportunity to hug and embrace their mothers, their fathers, their families, and to see their country. At the same time, yes, we are happy, but at the same time, the sense of sadness is also present, because some of them were forced to live outside Palestine. Some of them were deported to live in exile. And this is really a problem to them and to their families. We hope that one day there will be a comprehensive solution and they get the opportunity to return to their homeland, Palestine, for which they sacrificed much of their life.
And how does this leave you feeling, the fourth now prisoner exchange having taken place, all of them fairly smoothly, it has to be said, the reopening of the Rafah crossing, aid now making its way into Gaza with more reliability and in greater amounts? How does that leave you feeling about the ceasefire deal? Of course, looking ahead to Monday, when the two sides start further negotiations about phase 2 of the ceasefire deal, which many think will be the most contentious because, of course, it involves the full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza.
Yes, really, we live in a state of uncertainty and instability because the Israeli occupation side can't be guaranteed and can't be trusted anytime. Especially we heard a lot of statements over the past period of time from different Israeli officials and different political parties representatives in Israel, especially Smotrich, the Minister of Finance, who calls for the resumption of war against Gaza to make sure that Gaza is emptied of its people. And also this voice is raising among other Israeli politicians, especially in light of the scenes coming from Gaza, as Israel expected that the Palestinian political parties, the Palestinian resistance, are over in Gaza, and the people of the north of Gaza would never have the opportunity to return to the north. But what happened today is different. The people from the south returned to the north. We see how the Israeli hostages are released in a very organized and well-structured way, showing the power that the Palestinian people have in Gaza and elsewhere, and this won't be acceptable to the Israeli rightist parties and to the Israeli government and even the Israeli society itself. So is Israel going to commit to peace and to calm agreement, or is going to like figment any cause or any justification to resume its war on the people in Gaza? This is problematic, and it gives the Palestinians a sense of uncertainty, instability, and fear. But we hope that the sponsors of this agreement, the Arabs, the Muslims, won't this time keep silent and allow the Israeli occupation government to resume its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people.
And one of the things, Mr. Nazzal, that both sides will have to contend with going forward is the question of who exactly will govern Gaza going forward. And of course, both sides have radically different opinions on that. From your point of view, what would you like to see? What do you think would be functional, workable in terms of the governance of Gaza, but also realistic and acceptable to the Israeli side?
First, the Palestinian decisions should not be based on the Israeli occupation conditions and the Israeli occupation dictates. But with regard to the governance of Gaza, which is fully demolished and needs a lot of resources and long time to be rebuilt and to come back as a habitat for human beings, should be determined, the future of Gaza should be determined by its people, the people who paid of their blood, the people who paid of their life, the people who sacrificed of their children and their property and their houses. These are the people who decide who should govern Gaza. The Palestinian people suffered decades and decades, and their suffering is still going on, and it is getting worse. So these people have the right to decide and determine who rules and who governs them and their land. I think in this context, the national unity between Fatah, Hamas, all the Palestinian political parties is a must and is a requisite and hope and wish by every Palestinian citizen in order to address the whole world with one language and to have one unified Palestinian discourse and end these differences between the political parties in order to tell the world that Gaza is part of the Palestinian land and the Palestinian land must be governed by the Palestinian people and the Palestinian representatives of the Palestinian people. Those representatives who should be elected and chosen by the people, by the will of the people, the will of the Palestinian society. This is what I wish as a Palestinian.
Do you think that's realistic, though, a kind of sustainable unity between, as you say, these various Palestinian factions, including Fatah, including Hamas? Do you think that that's possible in the long term?
If it is not possible now, I think it must be possible because nothing is realistic than the Palestinian national unity. After this sacrifice, we are talking about 200,000 Palestinians killed and injured. We are talking about 10,000 Palestinians are still under the rubble. We are talking about a large part of occupied Palestine completely demolished. No housing units, no facilities, nothing at all. All these factors must be drivers for the different Palestinian political parties to sit together, come together, and speak one language, speak one voice in order to serve their people and guarantee the future for the Palestinian generation to come. Because what we are going through as the current generation of the Palestinian society should not be relived and re-experienced by our children and by the generations to come. Otherwise, it would be disastrous to the Palestinian people and to all those who love the people of Palestine.
Okay, well, we've spoken a little bit there about the Palestinian side of this in terms of, as you say, national unity between factions. Another critical part of ensuring that the ceasefire holds and then moving forward with figuring out a future for Gaza will, of course, be Israel and its international allies, chief among them the US. How optimistic are you about the new Trump administration and its goals and ambitions for Gaza going forward? Do you think that the same level of determination and pressure will be kept up for ensuring a sustainable peace, or how do you feel about it?
If we return to the origins of the Palestinian catastrophe, we find that the American administration, the United States, was the first to provide the Israeli occupation with everything it needs to expand its colonial power and to have control over all of Palestine. The Palestinian Nakba in 1948, yes, it is true that it was supported by the UK, but the United States at the same time was providing everything possible for Israel to become true at the expense of the Palestinian people. So the American position against the Palestinian cause and against the Palestinian rights is not new, really. It is rooted in the history of the Palestinian catastrophe. And I don't think that it is going to change. We saw how Biden's administration provided billions of dollars and thousands of tons of explosives to Israel to complete its genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people. And now we are witnessing Trump's administration calling for cleaning out Gaza and taking the Palestinians out to Jordan and to Egypt. At the same time, he had declared the deal of the century, giving Jerusalem to Israel as if Jerusalem is part of his real estate and he can give it to anybody he wants. So we are not optimistic about the American position, and we know what America is planning for. But what we need is the position of the Arab and Islamic nations. If they don't side with the Palestinian people for the defense of Jerusalem, which is the city of all Arabs, Muslims, and the Christians, and if they don't side with the Palestinian people, not only for the beauty of the eyes of the Palestinian people, as saying as, but for the interest of the region, because Israel is an expansionist colonial power. And once it controls all of Palestine and ends the cause of Palestine and the existence of the Palestinian people, it will expand to control Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, and other countries. And you know that Israel doesn't want to see any strong government or a strong power in the Middle East. It wants to control all of the Middle East. So siding with the Palestinian people, supporting the Palestinian people by all the regional parties is not only in the interest of the Palestinian cause, but in the interest of the peoples and the governments of the whole region.
All right, Osama Nazzal, a Palestinian affairs analyst who's joining us from Jenin in the occupied West Bank. So many more things we could talk about today, but very grateful for your time. Thank you for joining us here on TRT World. Much appreciated.